Your brain does not care about your big goals. The scary part is most people pour their energy into massive transformations, extreme routines, and ambitious overhauls, and then quietly fall apart within a few weeks because their brain was never designed to commit to something that large that fast. New diets get abandoned by week 2. New workout plans collapse the moment life gets busy. New morning routines disappear the first time you oversleep. And every time this happens, people blame themselves instead of questioning the approach itself. In this video, we're going to break down why microhabits consistently outperform big goals, what neuroscience actually says about behavior change at scale, and how to use small, almost invisible actions to create lasting transformation. This is not another video telling you to dream bigger. This is about understanding why bigger was never the problem you thought it was solving. Most people believe ambition is the key ingredient to change. Set a massive goal, commit fully, and force your way through resistance until you become a different person. But that belief is quietly setting people up for repeated failure, because it ignores how behavior change actually works at the neurological level. Big goals require big behavior shifts immediately, and your brain treats sudden large shifts the same way it treats threats. It resists. This is why so many people start January with extreme motivation and by February feel like they failed completely. The problem was never their commitment. The problem was the size of the leap they tried to take all at once. And this pattern repeats every single year, not because people lack willpower, but because the model itself is built on a flawed assumption about how humans actually change. Habit 1. Understand why your brain resists big change. Neuroscience shows that your brain is wired for stability, not transformation. This is sometimes called homeostasis, your brain's tendency to maintain its current state and resist anything that disrupts it too quickly. When you attempt a massive lifestyle change overnight, new diet, new workout routine, new sleep schedule, new morning ritual all at once, your brain interprets this as instability. It responds the same way it would to any perceived threat, by trying to pull you back toward your familiar patterns. This is why willpower alone often isn't enough. You're not just fighting laziness. You're fighting your brain's built-in stability mechanism. So the first shift is recognizing that resistance to big change isn't a personal flaw. It's a predictable biological response, and once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself for something that was never really about effort in the first place. This reframe alone removes a significant amount of unnecessary shame that builds up after repeated failed attempts at dramatic transformation. Habit 2. Start so small that resistance doesn't activate. This might be the single most important principle behind microhabits. If a new behavior is small enough, it doesn't trigger your brain's resistance response at all. One push-up doesn't feel threatening. One page of reading doesn't feel threatening. 5 minutes of meditation doesn't feel threatening. But an hour-long workout, a 50-page reading goal, or a complete diet overhaul often does, simply because of scale. The strategy here isn't about being unambitious. It's about being strategic. Start with a version of the habit so small that your brain doesn't perceive it as a disruption worth resisting. Once that small action becomes automatic, which usually happens faster than people expect, expanding it feels natural instead of forced, because you're building on stability instead of fighting against instability. People often laugh at how small the first version feels, but that smallness is precisely the mechanism that makes it work. Habit 3. Focus on repetition, not intensity. A lot of people assume that bigger actions create faster results. But neuroscience around habit formation tells a different story. Neural pathways strengthen primarily through repetition, not through occasional intense effort. This means a 5-minute habit done daily creates more lasting neurological change than an intense 90-minute session done once a week. Consistency is what wires new behavior into your brain as automatic. Intensity without repetition mostly just creates exhaustion and inconsistency. This is why someone who walks for 10 minutes every single day often builds more lasting change than someone who occasionally pushes through an extreme workout and then avoids exercise for the next 2 weeks out of exhaustion or dread. The body and brain don't reward occasional heroics nearly as much as they reward quiet, boring repetition. Habit 4. Let momentum build naturally instead of forcing acceleration. One of the biggest mistakes people make with microhabits is rushing to make them bigger too quickly. They start with 1 page of reading, feel encouraged after a few days, and immediately jump to 30 pages, recreating the same overwhelming resistance they were trying to avoid in the first place. The The smarter approach lets growth happen gradually and naturally. If the small habit starts feeling consistently easy, increase it slightly, not dramatically. This protects the psychological safety that made the habit sustainable in the first place. Momentum should feel like a gentle slope, not a sudden cliff. Micro-habits work precisely because they avoid triggering resistance, and scaling too quickly reintroduces the very problem you were solving. Patience here isn't a weakness. It's the entire mechanism that prevents collapse. Habit 5, attach identity to consistency, not magnitude. A lot of people measure progress by how impressive their actions look. But sustainable change comes from how consistently you show up, not how dramatic any single action appears. Someone who reads one page daily for a year has built a stronger identity as a reader than someone who reads intensely for 1 week and quits. The micro-habit approach reframes success. Instead of asking, "Did I do something impressive today?" ask, "Did I show up in a way I can repeat tomorrow?" This single mental shift changes the entire emotional relationship you have with progress, because you stop measuring yourself against unsustainable standards and start measuring yourself against your own consistency. Over time, this identity becomes self-reinforcing, because you start acting in ways that match who you already believe yourself to be. Habit 6. Use micro-habits to rebuild self-trust. This is one of the most underrated benefits of small, consistent actions. Every time you follow through on a tiny commitment, your brain collects evidence that you are someone who does what they say they'll do. This matters more than people realize, because repeated failure at big goals often damages self-trust over time. You start doubting your own ability to follow through on anything. Micro-habits reverse this pattern. Because they're almost impossible to fail at, they create a steady stream of small wins that rebuild confidence in your own consistency. And that rebuilt self-trust eventually makes bigger goals feel achievable again, not because the goals got smaller, but because your belief in your own follow-through got stronger. This is often the missing ingredient for people who feel like they've tried everything and nothing sticks. Habit 7, accept that small looks unimpressive, and that's exactly why it works. A lot of people abandon micro-habits because they don't feel significant enough. 1 page of reading doesn't feel like progress. 5 minutes of movement doesn't feel like transformation. But this feeling is misleading. The visible smallness of the action has almost nothing to do with its long-term impact. What actually creates transformation is accumulation over time, not the size of any individual action. A habit that feels embarrassingly small today can compound into something completely different a year from now, simply because it was sustainable enough to continue. The discomfort of feeling like you're not doing enough is often the exact signal that you're finally doing something sustainable. Most people quit right at the point where the habit was finally becoming durable, simply because it didn't feel dramatic enough to count. So here's what this actually means for you, especially heading into 2026, when the old model of extreme transformation is finally losing its grip. People are growing tired of extreme routines and constant pressure to do more, and for good reason. Your brain was never the problem. The size of the changes you were attempting was. Understand why your brain resists big change. Start so small that resistance doesn't activate. Focus on repetition over intensity. Let momentum build naturally instead of forcing acceleration. Attach identity to consistency, not magnitude. Use microhabits to rebuild self-trust. And accept that small looks unimpressive precisely because that's what makes it sustainable. Do these long enough, and you'll stop chasing dramatic transformation and start experiencing something more durable, quiet, compounding change that doesn't require you to white-knuckle your way through misery to maintain it. The goal was never to feel impressive every day. The goal was to still be doing it a year from now. If this made sense and helped you rethink how change actually works, subscribe to Simple Ways of Life for more practical videos on self-discipline, habits, and calm personal growth. And if this genuinely shifted how you see progress, leave a like so more people struggling with the same thing can find it too.